All right, we are here with topic 7.10, the New Deal. Let's get into it. So, the first thing we're going to look at is bank issues. And so, the main idea here is that Roosevelt's early New Deal reforms, they're going to focus on restoring public confidence in the banking system through regulation and consumer protections. So first of all, there was something called the bank holiday. So FDR's first step as president is going to be this. And he wants to stabilize the banking system because bank runs cause banks to fail. You can see in 1933, there was like 4,000 banks that failed. And so how would that happen? So let's say, so a bank doesn't actually have enough money in it to give everyone all of their deposits back at once because it's lending that. So you deposit money, it lends that money out to other people. And then, as those people pay it back, it will pay the bank back. They'll eventually be able to give everyone the money deposited. Now, if given enough time, then the bank could, but just on hand in that day, no, the bank's not going to have enough money. Okay. And so what happens if the stock market is crashing, right? And remember, a lot of these banks, they're not going to get the money back that is owed to them because they lent out money to people for people to buy stocks. And when the stock market crashed, those stocks were useless. So they just couldn't get the banks had all these bad loans out, and those bad loans are actually made with the money that people deposit into the bank, right? So if everybody knows that, let's say the bank only has let's make a hypothetical bank and it has 100 customers, right? The bank's going to have way more than that, but 100 is an easy number to work with. So this bank only has enough to pay out 20 of its customers. Well, if you know that, you're going to go to the bank right away and try to get your money out of there because you know if you don't, those 20 lucky people are going to get their deposits out, and you're going to be stuck with nothing because the bank's going to fail after that 20th person, right? So what happens then is a bank run. Everybody's going to go to the bank, try to pull their money out all at the same time, and the bank's going to fail. And so that's what this bank holiday was created to stop. And so the idea, it closed all the banks only temporarily. And then banks could only reopen once their financial stability had been confirmed through federal examinations. So this reassured the public, preventing further bank runs and restoring confidence in the financial system. So the next thing is the FDIC and the Glass-Steagall Act. So the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933 established the FDIC. That's the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And think about that deposit insurance. How is that going to stabilize the banking system? Well, the FDIC, it's a federal agency, and it's going to say, we're going to insure your deposits up to a certain amount. Now, at that time, it was 5,000. Obviously, now it's a lot more. I think last time I checked, it was like 35,000. And so that's going to provide a safety net for bank customers in case of failures. So people are going to feel more comfortable leaving their money in the bank. So it's also going to prevent banks from engaging in risky investments, such as those speculative investments in the stock market where they would lend people money and those people would put up the stocks that they would buy as collateral. And so somebody would only put 10% down. And let's say they wanted to buy $1,000 worth of stock. They would give the bank $100 for a down payment, get that $1,000. So they put 10% down, buy $1,000 worth of stock. And then once the stock market crashed, all of that money was just completely gone. And the banks, there was nothing for them to repossess because the stocks were worthless, right? And so this Glass-Steagall Act is going to stop that from happening. And so that's going to be another thing. So the bank holiday, only banks that are good can reopen. The bank insurance, right, with the FDIC, you can leave your money in there. First of all, with the bank holiday, you can leave your money in there. The federal government has certified that this bank is good. FDIC, oh, now you can leave your money in there because the federal government will pay you back up to a certain amount. Glass-Steagall, oh, you can leave your money in there because the banks are not going to be lending it out to people to put into the stock market and lose it all, and there's nothing in collateral. Okay, now dealing with the stock market itself was the SEC, and that's the Securities and Exchange Commission, and that's it's been created to regulate the stock market. So it's going to investigate fraud. It's going to require companies to disclose financial statements, and it's going to aim to create a level playing field for all investors. And they significantly, it's going to reduce speculative practices that had contributed to the stock market crash. Okay, and another thing about that is that like insider trading is going to become illegal. And so the idea of insider trading, so let's say I'm a CEO of a company or a CFO, I'm high up in a company, and I know something bad's going on in this company, meaning that sales, let's say we sell toys or video games, man, we're only selling 30% of the video games we sold last year at this time. Once that information gets out, the stock's going to go way down. So I might try to sell my stock before anybody else finds out about it. Now, that was what happened before the Great Depression, right? But now that's going to be illegal because that's called insider trading. So you can trade your stock, but only after the public knows the information, all the information that you know. And so if you do it before that, that's insider trading. If you remember, who was it? Martha Stewart. She went to jail for a year for insider trading. Okay. The next one is the Farm Credit Administration and the FHA. So the Farm Credit Administration provided low interest loans to struggling farmers to meet mortgage demands and purchase essential equipment. The FHA, or the Federal Housing Administration, and this is still around, helped stabilize the housing market by insuring mortgages, making home ownership more accessible to those with modest incomes. Okay, the next thing FDR deals with is job relief. So New Deal job relief programs directly addressed unemployment by creating jobs through public works and infrastructure projects. So first of all, we're going to look at the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. So this program provided direct funds to states and cities to sustain relief programs already in place. And then we're going to have the PWA, the CCC, and the TVA. And so one of the things you're going to see about the New Deal, it's going to be like alphabet soup. There's going to be all these different federal agencies that are going to be created. Probably these three are actually, all of them are important, particularly the CCC. So let's go through them. So the first one is the Public Works Administration. That's going to focus on large infrastructure projects. And that's going to create jobs, and it's going to modernize America. The next one, this one you should really know. This is the CCC, or the Civilian Conservation Corps, and it's going to employ young men to work in environmental conservation projects like planting trees and building parks. And so when I was growing up in Pennsylvania, there was a park that was, maybe 20 minutes from my home called Parker Dam, and it was a nice park. You could go there with your family. There was a dam that was built there. There was all kind of trails you could go walking on. And it was just a very nice thing. And it was created by the CCC boys in the 1930s. And so I think there was some plaques up that you can learn about it. And there was some tractor that was left there from the 1930s that you could look at. And so they made this like mini museum out of it. Okay. And so the idea was these young boys, unskilled labor, maybe 18, 19 years old, and there was no jobs for them. And so they would go and work out in the woods somewhere and get away from their families. And it was kind of like almost like going to camp, okay? And so they would be out there working. They didn't really get paid that much, but money would be sent home to their families. And so this would give families some money, and it would give these young men a chance to work and earn some money. Okay, so another one is the Tennessee Valley Authority, and that's going to build dams to generate electricity and control flooding. And that's going to transform one of the poorest regions in the country, and that's the Tennessee Valley. So let's look into this a little bit more. So the WPA, this is not the PWA. Remember, the PWA, which we're going to mention here again, was the Public Works Administration. That's large infrastructure projects. The WPA is going to address unemployment also on a massive scale, but it's going to enrich America a lot through like art, history, and infrastructure projects. So the Works Progress Administration, that's the WPA, and this is going to be the largest New Deal agency. It's going to employ millions to build infrastructure like roads, schools, and hospitals. And a big thing that it's going to do is it's going to support cultural projects. And so you had something called Federal Project Number One, which was a subset of the WPA, and it's going to employ artists, musicians, writers, and actors. And so those people are going to have a really hard time finding jobs during a Great Depression, okay? Because if you're struggling to, let's say I'm a business owner, I'm a factory owner, I'm not going to hire a artist to paint a mural on my building when I'm just struggling to make ends meet. Maybe if I have a lot of extra money, I can hire someone to do that, right? But not during the Great Depression. And so people like historians and things like that, they're going to have a really hard time getting jobs, and so they're going to be employed by something like Federal Project Number One, which is part of the Works Progress Administration. So you have initiatives like the Slave Narrative Projects, and so that's going to record the oral histories of formerly enslaved individuals, and you can even go look at WPA slave interviews, something like that. You can Google that up, find it, and there's some very interesting things, some very interesting history that was saved by the WPA workers in Federal Project Number One. So you have visual artists creating murals for the government, sculptures, and public art, and some of that, it still resonates today. So there's this infrastructure legacy of the Public Works Administration, and those were projects, major landmarks like LaGuardia Airport in New York and Hoover Dam near where we live. And so though it's criticized for its inefficiency, the WPA left behind a significant legacy of durable public works and cultural enrichment. All right, now we're going to look at how the New Deal reshaped labor relations by protecting workers' rights and regulating business practices. So first of all, we have the National Recovery Administration. That's the NRA, and it sought to standardize wages and work hours, but it faced challenges, including being declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So then in 1935, you had the Wagner Act, and that's going to help legalize labor unions and protect workers' rights to collective bargaining. And that's just basically how a labor union bargains for benefits for its workers. Okay, and then we have the Fair Labor Standards Act, and that act is going to establish a federal minimum wage, restrict child labor, and introduce overtime pay, laying the groundwork for modern labor protections. And so having a minimum wage and overtime pay are going to be two things that are going to be really necessary to increase employment. So let's say at this time there's like 25 or 30% unemployment. Maybe today there's like 4% unemployment, right? So 25 to 30% is going to be like 6-7 times what we have today. And so what's going to happen? Let's say I have a factory, right? And what I can do is instead of hiring new people, what I can do is I can just lower the wage of the person who works for me now, and they're going to continue to work for me because, well, where are they going to go? Hard jobs are hard to come by, and then I can make them work more hours. So maybe I'll lower their hourly rate, but they'll go from working 8 hours to 12 hours. Well, they're just going to keep on working, right? And so maybe they'll be making the same amount of money, but they'll be working more hours. What that's going to do is if they're working 4 more hours a day, right, that's going to take away jobs from other people. So think about it like this. If I had 2 people who were working 12 hours a day, that's 24 hours of work. But if I had 3 people working 8 hours a day, that's 24 hours of work. So you can see how if I'm the federal government and I want there to be 3 people employed instead of 2, I can say, well, there's overtime pay. So if somebody works more than 40 hours a week, that's 5 8-hours a day, 5 8-hour days, you have to pay them time and a half. So if they're making $10 an hour, you now have to pay them $15 an hour for that, for those hours above 40 hours. So what that's going to do is force, let's say, the factory owner, the business owner, instead of working his current employees to death, it'll be more advantageous for that owner to hire additional workers. Not only that, that person can't just like lower the wage to make up for the time and a half, right? And so now businesses are going to be forced to hire more workers instead of relying upon the current workers and just working them to death at low wages. So those are some things in business and labor. So, criticism of the New Deal's limited scope led to the creation of something called Social Security. And so that's what we have today. And that's going to expand federal responsibility for citizens' welfare. So, Huey Long and Francis Townsend. So, these guys are populists and reformers. So, Dr. Townsend criticized the New Deal for not going far enough. Long proposed redistributing wealth through his Share Our Wealth program, while Townsend advocated for a pension plan for seniors, leading to the Social Security Act of 1936. So, this is landmark legislation. It created a federal insurance program funded by payroll taxes, providing benefits to retirees, the unemployed, and vulnerable populations like widows and orphans. And it transformed the government role in providing economic security. But there was some court opposition. And so some very kind of scary things are going to happen during this time. And so FDR's New Deal is going to face legal challenges, but it's ultimately going to actually reshape American politics. And it's going to forge this lasting coalition for the Democratic Party. So, facing opposition from a conservative Supreme Court, Franklin Delano Roosevelt proposed adding justices for every member over 70, aiming to pass more New Deal programs. The plan was controversial and ultimately abandoned, but the court began upholding New Deal legislation as older justices retired. And so this court packing plan, the reason why it's so bad is that if I can so the Supreme Court is the one that's going to be the ultimate yes or no for any type of bill that I want to get passed as a president, any type of action that I want to take as a president, right? And so if the Supreme Court is telling me that my ideas for bills and laws and executive orders and things like that is unconstitutional, well, the number of Supreme Court justices is not set by the Constitution. So what I could have is a plan to switch it from, let's say, 9 Supreme Court justices to, let's say, 15. And I could add 6 new Supreme Court justices who I know are going to vote my way. Then I can just do whatever I want. And eventually I can become a dictator. And so during this time in Europe, there was a lot of people who were becoming dictators. You had Mussolini, you had Hitler in Italy and in Germany, and in Russia you had Stalin, and these people were gaining more and more and more power. So the political realignment, so the New Deal forged a democratic coalition that included minorities, laborers, farmers, and urban residents, reshaping American politics for decades. Okay, and this is the slide about the political alignment that I was talking about. And so, as I said, minorities, labor, farmers, women, the South itself, urban machines were voting for Democrats. And so the Democrats are going to be transcendent in American politics for a very long time after this. Okay, so we have labor migration. So here, economic hardship during the Great Depression intensified internal migration and highlighted racial and ethnic discrimination. So the Great Migration and labor shifts. The Great Migration of African Americans out of the South expanded economic opportunities and civil rights activism. At the same time, the Dust Bowl forced many farmers to migrate to cities or other regions seeking better opportunities. And then there was the repatriation of immigrants. So during the Depression, Mexican and Filipino workers faced deportation or repatriation campaigns, often losing their jobs and homes in the process. And so the idea is that if I am trying to work and I'm an American who grew up here and there are Mexican or Filipino workers who are taking my jobs, so some people are going to demand that they be sent back and deported. And so that's one thing that happened there.